surprise there'll be, 'cause it came our way by freight, but I'm going home in state, down the Dixie Highway. I'll be wending my way, just gonna fly away home to my little nest in Dixie. How I count the hours till I see the flowers, roses red, violets blue, down where they grow forget-me-nots for you. Oh, my cat will fly away when I'm wending my way down the Dixie Highway. I'm going home.
The Dixie Highway is an example of an early named highway.
Built between about 1915 and 1925.
Early days of the automobile, most cities were connected with dirt roads.
It's the old road, as we call it.
At one time, a very busy highway.
It was intended to bring tourists to the south.
We want to get people funneled onto the Dixie Highway.
And it was well traveled back in those days.
It was early in automobiles history in America.
Came right down through the heart of Dalton, the heart of Dixie.
What is the Dixie Highway? Was it a road to Dixie or a road through Dixie? Where in Dixie did it go? At the end of the 19th century and in the early years of the 20th, Americans began to recognize the need for better roads. The Good Roads movement was begun by bicyclists in the 1880s, but by the 1910s, the movement had turned its attention to automobile travel.
The lifespan of the Dixie Highway overlapped with something called the Good Roads movement, which was a social movement during the Progressive era in which citizens tried to lobby for the construction of more and better roads and highways, and they were particularly concerned with building more long-distance highways because of the popularity of the automobile. So when the Dixie Highway was first proposed, it wasn't the first time that a north-south highway had been proposed. People had been calling for that for quite some time, but it was the first proposed project that really got off the ground. It was especially important for farmers because at that time the only way they could market crops was via the railroads. And so if there weren't a lot of road maps back in those days, but if there had been a local road map, all the roads looked like spokes on a wheel with a railroad depot at the center and roads branched off into various farming communities, but those places didn't link up with one another. So if you wanted to travel long distance, you were pretty much limited to wherever the railroads would take you. It gave them more flexible marketing options for their crops and reduced their dependence on the railroads, which they'd historically detested.
Very few of the citizens of the state of Georgia know what good roads are. Most of them have never seen one.
At that time, roads were little more than trails, dirt paths across the countryside that often dated back to the age of the American Indian. These paths became rutted by the passage of horses, buggies, and wagons, and turned into muddy quagmires in the rainy season. Stream crossings meant getting wet where the water was shallow and could be forded, and rivers were crossed on ferries or boats. Signs and directions were non-existent, and travel was difficult and time-consuming, especially in bad weather.
Automobile roads at the dawn of the early 20th century probably were not that much different from the lanes that Union armies marched down, and might have even been worse than those roads were in the 1860s. So something had to be done.
Realizing their support was integral for the development of good roads, in 1893 the federal government established the Office of Road Management to advise state and local governments on road construction. The U.S. Postal Service began providing rural-free delivery mail service in 1902, and their perspective on the poor conditions of roads throughout the United States further encouraged the federal government to take steps toward the improvement of roads. These first efforts, however, were not enough to meet the growing demand for better roads.
The present system of road working in Georgia is a failure and a disgrace to civilization. Commerce demands a change. Better roads are the great and growing needs of the state.
Because the federal government was slow to actively promote better roads between the 1890s and the 1920s, private individuals, many of them with strong ties to the automobile industry, took the lead in developing private marked highways. The Lincoln Highway, completed in 1913, was the nation's first transcontinental road and was conceived and organized by Carl G. Fisher. Fisher was a wealthy Indiana businessman and an automobile enthusiast who had helped create the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in 1909. The Lincoln Highway went from Times Square in New York City to Lincoln Park in San Francisco, crossing a total of 14 states. Having played a role in the creation of the Lincoln Highway, Fisher turned his eyes south.
He realized what an opportunity to make people buy cars, having to take trips to go to sunny Florida. So to get to Florida, you got to go through Georgia from up in Chicagoland and cold places like that. So the highways were developed.
While a small tourist industry had developed for northern visitors traveling by rail, the automobile offered the chance to greatly expand tourism as more and more middle-class Americans were joining the ranks of automobile ownership.
Carl Fisher is wanting to put a line on a map showing where that road is going. Now, Carl Fisher he strikes me as the kind of person that doesn't want to be bothered with a lot of details. He just wants to get that road designated so that he can start having people come down to the real estate that he's speculating on in Miami, Florida.
Fisher envisioned automobile travel as a different experience than travel by train. In a car, people could see, experience, and interact with the places they were passing by. Local historic sites, towns, restaurants, and regional crafts were all opportunities that awaited the automobile traveler. In the new world of the automobile, vacation travel would be as much about the journey as it was about the destination.
The family vacation, that was something done in your car. Yeah, you were going to drive across the USA in your Chevrolet and put the kids, stuff them in the back and just have a great time. In concept sometimes.
Fisher's plan for what would become the Dixie Highway was first proposed in November 1914 at the 4th meeting of the American Road Congress in Atlanta.
The response was overwhelming. Everybody jumped on board. And that's really the reason this project got off the ground, because people had proposed north-south highways many, many times before, and they never went anywhere. No one ever did anything about it. But when they first proposed the Dixie Highway, local businessmen, newspaper editors, farmers, ordinary people were really enthusiastic. Their timing couldn't have been better.
Northern supporters of the Dixie Highway estimated that if such a north-south road existed, 300,000 cars would use it to travel south that winter. They calculated the economic impact of such travel and estimated that each car would carry 4 passengers, and each passenger would spend an average of $5 each day on food, lodging, gasoline, and other purchases. That meant that each day these travelers were in the South, $6 million would change hands from Northerners to Southerners.
It does not take a great deal of figuring to see the immense amount of money that would be left in southern states by an invasion of this class of desirable people.
Over 5,000 people, including business leaders and politicians, were present at the Dixie Highway organizational meeting held on April 3, 1915. In attendance was Georgia Governor John Slayton, as well as the governors of Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. The Dixie Highway Association decided that its governing directors would include 2 individuals appointed by the governors of each of the 7 states along the Dixie Highway's route. Governor Slayton appointed Clark Howell and W.T. Anderson as Georgia's representatives. Howell and Anderson were both newspaper men and strong promoters of good roads as a means of attracting economic development to Georgia. A one-time candidate for governor, Clark Howell became the majority owner of the Atlanta Constitution in 1901. W.T. Anderson, a native of Hayneville, Georgia, was the editor and owner of the Macon Telegraph. Together, Howell and Anderson used the power of their newspapers to promote the creation of the Dixie Highway. The Dixie Highway Association debated the route of the proposed road network. Carl Fisher favored a single highway, while another faction led by Clark Howell pushed for multiple routes as a way to spur road development. Presentations were made to the Dixie Highway Association in May 1915 by various county and local governments. Each outlined the route the road would follow through their county, the improvements local governments would make to their roads, and the number of attractions along their route.
And Clark Howell doesn't want to go off half-cocked and come up with a highway route that is going to preclude the best roads being used. During a closed-door session, the board of directors thrash it out, and Howell comes out of that closed-door session, I think, victorious, and announces that a twin alignment is going to be developed that will give motorists an option and will enable communities along the route to make improvements and hopefully ensure that that road is passable year-round.
The people in the communities were as visionary, if not even more so, than the organizers of the roads. The organizers would come through, and sure enough, communities embraced these roads.
The Eastern Division ran from Upper Michigan through Ohio, Western Kentucky, and Tennessee. It entered Georgia just south of Chattanooga. The Eastern Division in northern Georgia was commonly referred to as the battlefield route because it connected Civil War sites between Chickamauga and Kennesaw Mountain. From Atlanta, it turned east past Stone Mountain and on to Milledgeville and Waynesboro. There, the Eastern Division turned south through Savannah and continued along the Georgia coast into Florida, where it ended in Miami. The Western Division officially began in Chicago and passed through Indiana, central Kentucky, and Tennessee. From Chattanooga, the Western Division ran through Rome in northwest Georgia before connecting up with the Eastern Division north of Atlanta. It travels south to Macon, where it split again in southwest Georgia, traveling through Americus, Albany, and Thomasville, before continuing on to Tallahassee, Florida, and eventually terminating in Miami. There were other segments in Georgia. A central route split from the Western Division at Macon and connected to Jacksonville via Folkestone. A Carolina route split from the Eastern Division in Knoxville, Tennessee, and ran through North and South Carolina before entering Georgia at Augusta and connecting back to the Eastern Division at Waynesboro. The old National Highway between Perry and Valdosta also was a popular route with Florida-bound tourists, although it was never officially designated as part of the Dixie Highway. Georgia benefited most by the multi-route approach with almost 1,500 miles of the auto trail passing through 62 counties.
Georgia ended up with quite a bit of mileage, significantly more mileage than most other states that were on the route.
The town of yesterday, which is fortunate enough to be located on the railroad where the train reached it, is the city of today. The town of today, which is fortunate enough to be located on a first-class public highway where the automobile and the motor truck reach it, is the city of tomorrow.
Along most segments, work was done by convict labor and chain gangs. The use of convict labor emerged in Georgia and throughout the South after the Civil War, and involved the state's leasing of prisoners, most of whom were African American.
Chain gangs became legal in the state of Georgia in 1908 as a part of Hoke Smith's progressive platform. And the idea behind making the conversion from convict leasing, whereby convicts had been rented out to sawmills, railroads, private companies, and transitioning those to chain gangs was that these were state convicts. They should be put to work for the public good. And because this overlapped precisely with the high point of the Good Roads movement, it was a very popular idea that you put prisoners to work on the roads. And so they did the back-breaking labor of actually stitching together, improving the roads first, and then stitching together all of these small, short little county roads, dirt roads, and making them travelable for tourists year-round.
As the route came together, the Dixie Highway Association worked to mark the various alignments. The first official signs featured a cotton bale with the words Dixie Highway, but these proved to be too expensive. In most Georgia communities, marking consisted of directional signs or cheaply painted red and white bands on fences and telephone poles.
After the highway would come through, it was the communities that really built the interesting places to stay and the tourism around them, anything along the road. It was the creativity of the people who were along the roads.
Printed maps and books were the guides to traveling the Dixie Highway. In these early days of automobile travel, roads and road signs were limited, so travelers needed these guides to know not only where they were going, but also what they would find along the way. Maps were prepared by various automobile industries, including gas stations and tire manufacturers, and provided information not only on routes, but also on the conditions of the roads. Directions were typically mapped and described by segment. The Mohawk-Hobbs Guide to the Dixie Highway was 22 pages long and included descriptions of the road segments. For example, the 77-mile-long segment from Fitzgerald to Waycross included a topographic profile showing the elevations of the road along the way. The profile also indicated change in road pavement types. The 8-mile section from Fitzgerald to Osceola was noted as paved in asphalt. The 32-mile segment from Osceola to Douglas as sand clay road, and the 12-mile segment from Nichols to Telmore as rough sand. The profile also noted distinctive scenery. Douglas to Nichols was described as farming country, Nichols to Bickley as many pine trees. The rise of automobile vacations led to the creation of roadside attractions. While the Dixie Highway Association intentionally routed the road to pass historic sites, especially Civil War battlefields, the road also spurred and supported the development of commercial tourist attractions. Opened in 1933, overlooking US 27, Rock City Gardens, Georgia was a well-known name to those traveling along the old Dixie Highway.
Rock City Gardens was really the dream of Frida Carter. And Frida was the daughter of German immigrant Charles F. Udermullen. So she had this great romantic vision of fairyland, and Rock City Gardens fit that vision exactly. So she laid out the trail and created the names of all the unique formations. But the ingenious part of the gardens was her husband, Garnet Carter, promoted them. And Rock City is probably as famous for our advertising as we are for the gardens itself.
Rock City was a garden built into the winding stone ravines and outcrops on Lookout Mountain and provided picturesque views of 7 states. It became a successful roadside attraction and is now listed on the National Register of Historic Places.
During the Depression is when all of this advertising really started. So he was investing in his attraction and charging admission, but he had to get more people. So he had to advertise.
Carter hired Clark Byers to paint rural barns at no cost to their owners, as long as the owners allowed him to paint advertisements on the barn walls or roofs. "See Rock City" was the best-known slogan.
He took Clark out and found that first barn on US 41, said, "Clark, this is what I want you to paint. See Rock City, high top Lookout Mountain, near Chattanooga, Tennessee." So we're in Georgia. We've always been in Georgia, but people don't know where Lookout Mountain is. But visitors were coming here in the mid-20s by automobile. But what really made the automobile and Rock City a success was Garnet Carter's outdoor advertising. But Uncle Garnet was targeting people that were driving down the Dixie Highway or north on the Dixie Highway and telling them about Rock City Gardens. And one of his great slogans was, "All roads lead to Rock City."
For various communities, I mean, they had their own reason for encouraging the highway through their town. For some, like in Dalton, it was a way to encourage economic development.
Along the Dixie Highway near Dalton, locals hung handmade chenille bedspreads out for sale to automobile tourists who were passing by. A peacock design became especially popular, and this stretch of the Dixie Highway became known as Peacock Alley. The success of this home-based industry helped spur the development of the textile and subsequent carpet industry in Dalton.
Dixie Highway gave the industry, the cottage industry of bedspreads, chenille bedspreads, the opportunity for a large amount of customers to pass right through. They were from all walks of life, and most of them from all the way from the Northeast to the Midwest to the Upper Ohio Valley. Dalton in the 40s and the 50s was when the chenille outlets were really flourishing. My family and Bradley's family both had owned gift shops on the old 41, and a lot of times they would be within, 5 miles of one another, just one after another after another.
Yeah, we had some that probably within a mile of each other.
That's true.
Sometimes maybe not even a name on them, I don't know for sure. Because sometimes they was probably 7 or 8 different places going at one time with aunts and uncles. So it was competition just right there within few feet.
Amongst kinfolks.
Yeah.
I think our dad both were from a generation of workaholics because they came through the Depression and wondered where their next meal was coming from. So that made them hard workers. Dad would use postcards as advertisement, and he would have a whole box full. He'd get them printed in bulk, and they would be sitting right on the counter next to the checkout. One particular one was my mom was monitoring a chenille robe, and it was the old black and white, and I can say I was in that picture because she's pregnant with me. The Dixie Highway was the route and thoroughfare that brought our customers to us. If we didn't have access to all the tourists traveling to the Sunshine State and going back home, that would have hurt us all, wouldn't it, Bradley?
Yeah, that really helped the community, the county, is giving people a job.
And then as time went on in the 50s, the same labor force with new technology, with the carpet machines, is how Dalton transitioned from being a bedspread cottage industry to the carpet capital of the world.
Automobile travel also influenced roadside restaurants. Local cafes and restaurants were anxious to serve and sell Southern food to travelers, but travelers were often in a hurry, and while they wanted Southern food, they also wanted it served quickly. In Georgia, along the Dixie Highway in Avondale Estates, neighbors Joe Rogers and Tom Fortner opened a restaurant in 1955 with the motto, "Good food fast." Travelers agreed, and the restaurant quickly expanded. Known to those on the road for offering 24-hour service and to loyal customers for staying open no matter what, Waffle House has become an icon of the region that brought Southern hospitality to the restaurant business. As founder Joe Rogers put it, "We are not in the food business, we are in the people business." Truett Cathy opened a restaurant known as the Dwarf Grill along the road in Hapeville in 1946. The Dwarf Grill served a full menu, but it was Cathy's deep-fried chicken breast sandwich that launched his chain of Chick-fil-A restaurants. The Dixie Highway Association published a magazine entitled The Dixie Highway that identified places to visit along the road and contained advertisements from businesses along the way. The January 1924 issue featured Stone Mountain on the cover and an article with the title, "Stone Mountain, where is being carved a perpetual and indestructible monument to the men and women who fought, suffered, sacrificed, and died for the Southern Confederacy." In 1916, the United Daughters of the Confederacy received permission to use the north face of the mountain for memorial sculpture. The UDC hired Gutzon Borglum to create a Civil War memorial inspired by the famed Lion of Lucerne that commemorated the heroism of the Swiss Guard. The Dixie Highway magazine described Borglum's design as a panorama of the Confederate Army, with the artillery to be placed near the summit, following a line of cavalry led by the principal leaders of the Confederacy, including Jefferson Davis, Stonewall Jackson, and Robert E. Lee. However, Borglum abandoned the project in 1925 when he was awarded another job that involved carving into a mountainside, Mount Rushmore. Work on the Stone Mountain Memorial began again in 1964 and was completed in 1972. Now a state park, Stone Mountain remains one of Georgia's best-known tourist destinations. Travelers sought Georgia produce and food on their trips through the state. Peaches were popular, as were pecans.
So one day the boys said, if we pick up all these nuts, can we pitch a tent across the road and sell them to the Yankees going to Florida? But Grandmother kept saying no. She said, they probably don't know what pecans are either, or what to do with them, so they won't buy them. But they kept begging, so finally one day she gave in and said, okay, you can pitch a tent across the street and see if you can sell them. And they turned over $60 in one day selling pecans to the Yankees going to Florida. A light bulb went off in my grandmother's head. She said, now we know what to do with all these nuts. So first she started selling them right off her front porch. And of course let the little boys sit across the road some and sell some more. And then eventually she started cracking them and shelling them. Granddaddy finally said, well, y'all don't need to be selling pecans like this off the front porch and adding in all kind of weather over there. So he built one little room for them to sell their pecans. And then she decided, she said, well, I can make fudge and divinities that I've never put nuts in them, but I'll try nuts in them. Two of her sisters actually opened up a station just around the curve, less than a quarter of a mile from Swent's. And then she had a brother, B. Lloyd's. He built 2 stations right down the road on 41. And he was so funny, he built one and he found out, said that Northerners will not stop except on the right-hand side of the road. So he built a station directly across the street from the other one. He said, I'll get them coming and going. So everybody always thought that B. Lloyd was the one that got the business started, but it was actually my grandmother. It's what kept us alive, what kept us going. She taught Stucky how to make the candy. Well, her son Ink kept saying, don't give away all our, secret recipes. And she said, oh, he's way down there in South Georgia, said he won't bother us, and he didn't.
With a bumper harvest in the early 1930s, Eastman farmer Williamson Stuckey set up a roadside stand along the Dixie Highway and was amazed by the number of northern tourists who stopped to buy pecans and take them home as gifts for family and friends. In the years that followed, his wife Ethel added pecan candies, including the famous pecan log roll. The Stuckeys expanded their business, selling southern souvenirs, pecans, and pecan candies to northern travelers, reaching a peak of more than 350 stores. The Dixie Highway and the automobile also provided African Americans the opportunity for travel.
While at the same time the highway was exploiting African Americans in order to get the route built, it also gave African Americans greater control over their own mobility for the first time. Automobiles were incredibly popular in the South. They actually sold much faster in the South than they did in many other parts of the nation. They were particularly popular in the rural South, where people for so long had been isolated, and they were extremely popular among African Americans who could afford to buy automobiles.
Some of those who were fortunate enough to have a car used the Dixie Highway to leave Georgia during the Great Migration, when, in the early 20th century, millions of African Americans left the South, in search of a better life.
There were also limits on when and where and how African Americans could travel. Dixie Highway was a sort of marvel in its time and a very sophisticated route, but it was still mostly dirt roads, especially in Georgia. And so it was difficult to travel. Automobiles were not reliable, or as reliable as they are today. And so traveling the length of the state of Georgia would have taken someone quite a bit of time. So you had to stop frequently to go to filling stations. You had to stop to stay someplace overnight. And a lot of those businesses refused to serve African American travelers. And so even as it expanded their options and made it easier for African Americans to travel about in the South, it also exposed them to Jim Crow in ways that they had not experienced before. And so it was really a double-edged sword. It was very difficult for African Americans to travel freely, though many of them took advantage of it to the extent that they could.
Those African Americans who traveled the Dixie Highway and other roads in the South had their own guide. Published annually beginning in 1936 and known as the Negro Traveler's Green Book, this guide told African Americans where they could find lodging, food, beauty shops, drugstores, and service for their automobiles in the era of segregation, where many white-owned businesses did not serve African Americans. Published by Victor H. Green and Company, the book listed locations in Georgia by city and address. The Green Book promoted African American travel and quoted on its cover the words of Mark Twain, "Travel is fatal to prejudice."
With the introduction of this travel guide in 1936, it has been our idea to give the Negro traveler information that will keep him from running into difficulties, embarrassments, and to make his trips more enjoyable.
African Americans also used the automobile and the Dixie Highway to travel to local places of entertainment and recreation. African American rhythm and blues bands traveled across the South, playing at juke joints and theaters in small towns and larger cities. Known as the Chitlin Circuit, entertainers traveled by bus and performed around the state. The Douglas Theater was established by Charles Douglas, who worked in a number of businesses before establishing the theater as a place for African American performing arts in 1907. The Douglas was a movie theater and vaudeville hall that featured blues and jazz musicians including Cab Calloway and Bessie Smith, as well as R&B groups. Venues like the Douglas Theater on the Dixie Highway helped promote African American performing arts in Georgia. African Americans also traveled for sports. African American baseball teams were established in many small towns and would travel to other towns and cities to play their local teams. The automobile and the Dixie made such sporting events possible and provided another set of destinations for African Americans in the state. Heading south of Macon and through Albany, Radium Springs was another attraction for travelers on their way to Florida. The largest natural spring in the state and one of the 7 natural wonders of Georgia, Radium Springs was a popular spot for swimming, but was also sought out for its casino and dancing. The deep blue water of the springs flows at a rate of 70,000 gallons per minute and maintains a constant temperature of 68 degrees Fahrenheit.
Radium Springs is just up the road from where we're at, and it was a big casino-type design. It had a bubbling up clear water spring, the Radium Springs itself, and people could stop and swim, and the hotels were there along the way.
Originally named Blue Springs, the discovery of trace sources of the radium in the water led to its renaming in 1925 and further boosted the popularity of the springs as a spa and resort, as radium was thought to promote good health. Northern tourists appreciated the opportunity to swim in the spring's warm water during their winter trips south, while Southerners appreciated the spring's cool water in the warm summer months. The Mohawk Guide described resources a traveler would find at various points along the Dixie Highway.
I was a small boy. My adopted father in the early 40s built this called Pinewood Tourist Court. We moved here in the 40s, 41 or 42, and shortly thereafter there was a freeze on building and building materials on account of the war. And some of the cottages were not completed until after the war was over. The advertisement was done by people just seeing the place and stopping in. There were no signs up, just a Pinewood restaurant and tourist court. First of all, they would stop out at the front, and they would go on the inside and ask the clerk what was available. And she would tell them, and some of them would come out and take a look at the motel rooms, and the motel rooms were bed, and bathroom, and a fireplace, and with no hot water, okay? And they either stayed or they thanked us and left and went somewhere else because we didn't have anything else to offer, and there wasn't a whole lot on the road at that time for you to stay at. So most of them, when they stopped, stayed. Most of them was from the northern states that migrated during the winter months and had Florida homes that they've stayed down there. And then in the spring of the year, they'd come back along and visited. If they stayed with us going down, most likely they would stay with us coming back. As a young boy coming up, I was given a job. That was to haul wood from the truck shed out to the cottages and put it on their doorsteps along with fat light wood or lighter wood to be able to kindle wood, to be able to start the oak and the pine to burn. Most of the people coming from up north were not familiar with that type of fire. And many times they would ask me to start a fire for them, and I did that wonderfully. I love to do that because I got a quarter sometimes, and that was a lot of money back then. I had no desire to leave here. Still don't have a desire to leave here. Know I'm going somewhere one day, to heaven maybe. I hope so. And but outside of that, I have had no desire to leave home. This has been my home ever since I came here, and I've enjoyed it.
Further south, the Buckeye Camp was noted for its nice pine grove. Traveling toward the Florida border, the guide commented on the presence of the Okefenokee Swamp, noted that a repair shop, lunch, and gas could be found in Maddox, and finally described the Homeland Garage as reputed best in this section. The greatest challenge in building segments of the Dixie Highway was engineering. County governments lacked knowledge of engineering principles in road construction. The State Highway Department of Georgia, the predecessor of today's Georgia Department of Transportation, took the lead and developed standardized plans and specifications that could be adopted and implemented for local projects. Bridges in particular benefited from the Highway Department's involvement as the state developed modular plans for metal truss and then concrete bridges that could be built to varying heights and widths by local contractors.
The state of Georgia is spending $3.5 million per year on highway construction, making every effort to get concrete highway from Chattanooga to Waycross within the next year.
As the largest state east of the Mississippi and the state bordering Florida, Georgia was the linchpin of the Dixie Highway and the most heavily traveled state. By 1924, 5,786 miles of Dixie Highway had been completed, including 1,300 miles in Georgia. With various segments completed at various times, Georgia would top 1,500 miles of Dixie Highway at its peak. Historian Drake Hokanson described the Dixie Highway as a wandering pea vine. In Georgia, the Dixie Highway grew more like kudzu.
One of the critical things I think about the Dixie Highway is that it finally proved to everyone that there wasn't a distinction between farm to market roads and fancy tourist highways for automobile drivers. They were one and the same. So the same route that could serve a farmer trying to get his crops out of South Georgia and into some distant market for the first time, where he could look for more profitable and flexible marketing opportunities, that was the same highway that tourists were going to be able to use going to and from Florida.
Construction of the Dixie Highway, the rise of the automobile, and federal initiatives all resulted in changes to how roads were built and maintained. The Dixie Highway was largely complete by 1926, and in that same year, a federal system of numbered roads linked the various highways around the country into a single system.
When states formed their own highway departments, the identification of highways became standardized. So that's when you start seeing the rise of US 41, US 80, US 29. So that took the place of the named highways.
The state's prompt adoption of the federal system of road numbering reflected to some extent the growth of the state highway department. Georgia coordinated more construction than any other state in the South, developed strong credentials in engineering and design, and ushered in the next era of highway construction.
Society progressed not only with automobiles but also in the way we would travel, and so a lot of the routes were bypassed for bypasses around towns or for the interstates that were developed in the 50s, and so a lot of these towns got just left behind.
The next best exciting road was the one that you could travel at 45 miles an hour. Then the next one was the safe road that you could take at 55. The concept of the Dixie Highway, a named auto route, was just kind of slowly forgotten about through time.
American highways, whether measured by the resources committed or by the time and energy required for their construction and maintenance, stand as the nation's most substantial public works.
So, after 100 years, what remains of the Dixie Highway? To answer that question, the Georgia Department of Transportation, or GDOT, and New South Associates, a cultural resources management firm, researched, mapped, and surveyed the routes of the historic road. The goal of the study was to map the routes of the highway, identify what of the Dixie Highway still exists, and assist GDOT with evaluation of the historic road for the National Register of Historic Places.
This was something that was coming up in our project, so we would have a road widening project, and our background research would show that this was along a section of the Dixie Highway. We made the decision that we wanted to look at this resource as a whole and not just as these little individual pieces that we had been dealing with before, and so we contracted with New South Associates.
One of the goals of the project is to provide the Georgia Department of Transportation a toolkit for identifying and evaluating the portions of the Dixie Highway they encounter on future road projects, and give them some sense of how to treat these resources sympathetically moving forward. Prior to our survey, we held a series of public outreach meetings to engage the public, to let them know what we were doing, and to see if they had any information about the Dixie Highway in their community. Its antiquity was surprising to the public in general. And when we told people in the diners or in the motels what we were doing, they were surprised but then excited because there is a new vested interest in historic transportation networks. The modern idea of the Dixie Highway is largely informed by the post-interstate era. US 41, which has been branded the Dixie Highway, since that period, is the Dixie Highway that people have in mind.
I always assumed that it followed US 41, that 41 in its previous life was the Dixie Highway. And so it was surprising for me to see it branch off towards Stone Mountain towards Augusta, the Augusta area. It was surprising that the Atlantic Coastal Highway, US 17 along the coast, was in its former life Dixie Highway.
Dixie Highway Association maps from 1915 to 1925 looked more like connect the dots than the maps we see today. So charting the Dixie Highway through Georgia was quite challenging. To tackle this, we assembled historic road maps from the early 20th century that actually showed the roads connecting these communities. We developed a survey route from these historic maps and compared it to modern mapping to determine where we would survey through the state. We compared our survey routes with historic engineering plans at GDOT, and it confirmed a lot of our initial geographic analysis. We were able to separate old roads from the roads that were on the Dixie Highway. We took these survey routes and loaded them into a GPS and began driving the Dixie Highway. We used a car-mounted video camera to record our progress. It not only recorded the road, but also recorded the setting in which the road was located. As we surveyed, we noted characteristics that define historic roads versus new roads. Historic roads were typically more narrow and didn't possess formal shoulders. We encountered a myriad of road materials. Reinforced concrete from the 20s we often saw because that's a very durable thing and it lasts a long time. But sand clay, I mean, many of the routes we took in East Georgia are still sand clay. All these things kind of play into our discerning where this historic route took.
While many of the original Dixie Highway routes have been incorporated into our modern road network, visible remnants of the auto trail include abandoned bridges and bypass segments of the old gravel, sand clay, and concrete roads.
In addition to noting the characteristics of the road itself, we also looked at historic restaurants, gas stations, garages, and bridges associated with highway travel. And a lot of times these things wouldn't be part of the active roadway. You'd have to go off into the bushes off to the side of the road and maybe part that foliage, and then there it is. There's that missing bridge, a pony truss bridge that is no longer in use but still there. And it made me feel good finding these things because it let us know that we were on the right track. We photographed each one of these properties and noted their location and description in our field notes. We drove all over the state, covering 62 counties and recording over 500 resources on the highway. It was amazing to see how much actually remained. This is a part of Georgia history. It's a large and significant portion of Georgia history that people already think they know about, but there's more to it. And the scope and scale and the over 1,500 miles we drove will testify to that. Our research and the results from our survey will be compiled into a publicly available report that will aid GDOT in future project planning.
Welcome arches, historic signage, and roadside monuments continue to serve as touchstones along old Dixie Highway routes. Local service clubs and volunteer women's groups, most notably the Daughters of the American Revolution, United Daughters of the Confederacy, and Dixie Highway Women's Auxiliaries, memorialized local historic figures, events, and fallen soldiers of World War I with roadside monuments and tree plantings.
There is a cultural aspect to it that I think people are starting to realize the impact these early roadways had on development of their communities, of commerce in their communities, and are getting excited about maybe revisiting those old pathways.
One of our past GDOT projects included a bridge replacement along a 1920s era stretch of Dixie Highway in Mitchell County. We couldn't save the bridges. The bridges had were so severely deteriorated, we developed a plaque to go on the bridge. Our plaque shows the Dixie Highway logo and just informs the traveling public that this bridge that you're driving across now replaced a 1920s era bridge.
What did the Dixie Highway mean to Georgia? Atlanta began as a railroad hub, centered on the rail lines and roundhouse, in the part of town known as the Gulch. The city's business leaders, politicians, and promoters recognized the importance of transportation to the city. They in turn actively promoted the Dixie Highway as America entered the automobile age. Atlanta's location along both the eastern and western divisions of the Dixie Highway brought tourists through town, some of whom would stay, and help promote the city's status as the capital of the New South. Georgia's recognition of the importance of transportation and efforts to build the Dixie Highway helped keep the state literally at the center of the economic map of the South. The impetus for regional collaboration came out of the Dixie Highway and benefits Georgia today. With 159 counties, the building of the Dixie Highway provided a model in which small counties and towns could partner together on a project. This experience would serve as a seed for today's system of regional commissions. Within the story of the Dixie Highway, the Georgia Department of Transportation would build from these origins into one of the most respected transportation agencies in the country, providing its citizens and guests with an exceptional system of transportation. The challenge of designing and building the Dixie Highway set the high standards upon which GDOT advances road engineering into the 21st century. The Dixie Highway Association was disbanded in 1927, but the name lives on. Various markers and place names remain along the route, such as the Dixie Highway Yard Sale, which covers a 90-mile stretch along the former Dixie Highway in North Georgia.
People are looking to make travel fun again. The interstate system, while very convenient and very efficient, doesn't always satisfy the needs of the touring motorist. And a lot of these routes we found were already Georgia Scenic Byways. And developing a tourist base or a program for touring the Dixie Highway will bring people to places that have been bypassed by the modern road system.
This was a pretty important development, not just for the communities along the route, but for the United States. It was a nationally significant thing.
It still is the Dixie Highway and one of the most beautiful roads for people to travel.
The combination of the individual freedom provided by the automobile and the new accessibility the Dixie Highway provided really opened up the South to new experience and the travelers to experience the South.
Dixie Highway reminds me of my past, reminds me of my grandfather, it reminds me of traveling dirt roads.
The conveniences of new hotels and restaurants are not too far away, but it's a nice, slow-paced travel to go down the Dixie Highway. It parallels the bigger roads today.
I think that the Dixie Highway will remain a very important road for the future.
I'm a historian, so I enjoy looking at historic buildings, and I enjoy traveling to historic places. And so when you travel a historic road, you are traveling through time.
It was part of my life. I was, when I came home from the hospital, that's where I was raised, right on Old Highway 41.
The Dixie Highway is adventure. The Dixie Highway is, getting out on a road. Rent a convertible if you have to. Take the top down. Don't run the air conditioning. Don't crank the stereo, and don't go 70 miles an hour to get from one place to another. The Dixie Highway is a road to take, to experience, and to feel, and to just be a part of the road and the surroundings around you. That's what the Dixie Highway is.
Don't you worry what's round the bend, 'cause this this old highway is just a good old friend. It's leading me on all the way to the end, and I'll be holding your hand. So hush, my darling, oh my love, what lies ahead now, honey, we can never know. Just put your wheels down on the road and watch them roll. And don't you worry what's round the bend, 'cause this old highway is just a good old friend. It's leading us on all the way to the end, and you can hold my hand.